Chrono Odyssey's beta ended a few days ago, and boy did it leave a lot of people with mixed feelings. The build was outdated, the combat needed polish, and it looked nothing like what we saw at the Summer Game Fest. But underneath all of the backlash and the broken expectations, I think this beta revealed something bigger, not just about Chrono, but about the current MMO scene overall. I played a closed beta test across multiple characters and cleared most of the available content I could get my hands on. So here's my take on what actually happened, why so many of us walked away conflicted, and what might be the most important takeaway: managing expectations. Let me start with this. I didn't hate my time in the beta. I actually had fun. Exploring the world, testing weapons, messing around with different skill builds. There were moments where I genuinely lost track of time, and that doesn't happen unless the game is doing something right. Some players even found alternative ways to have fun. Yes! Yes! But the beta we got was rough, and I don't mean a few bugs. I'm talking about a 7-month-old build that clearly wasn't ready for the public. That leads to the real issue: expectation management. Before the beta announcement, Kakao dropped the gameplay trailer at Summer Game Fest. The environments looked gorgeous, the animation looked polished, and the boss encounter seemed quite challenging. The trailer, however, gave the impression the game was nearly ready to launch. What we got instead was nowhere near that. Even with realistic expectations, the difference was jarring. The ambient lighting was brutal. Whenever it scattered across water, it felt like it was trying to give you a migraine. Character movement felt clunky and imprecise due to how the game would preserve your momentum. That made things like jumping puzzles and trials more frustrating than they needed to be. Combat, though, wasn't actually that bad. I quite enjoyed it. Attacks had weight and sometimes too much. Take the longsword, for example. It felt slow and very clunky to use, probably by design since it can literally one-shot targets. One thing that really annoyed me was how terrible the lock-on feature was. Activating it takes away all camera control, and sure, I think that's kind of the point, but it desperately needs rework. You can't zoom in or out, and you're stuck with a rigid view, forced to follow your target wherever they move, making dodging attacks harder since you pretty much gave up on the direction you're dodging at. As for the quests, they were fine, nothing new really. Kill that, fetch this, butcher the testicles of that animal over there, you know, pretty standard MMO stuff. Enhancing your gear was also pretty straightforward. Get an item from drops, crafting or with tokens, buy the enchant item, and go to the NPC, and you're done. I assume they'll add more to it later, maybe start boosting item, but that's just a guess. I don't want to dive too deep into speculation. What we didn't know at the time was that the version we played was over 7 months old, and it was the same outdated build that many content creators had already played during the early previews. After the initial backlash, the CEO of Chrono Studio put out a statement saying the main goal of the beta was server stability testing, which is why they used an older build from the end of last year. That brings me to one question that's been stuck in my head. Why use such an outdated build, one that feels more like an alpha, for your first public test? I mean, I get it, the newer build had stability issues, but they also said it had significant improvements over the one we played. So what exactly were we testing? If most of the bugs and broken systems were already fixed, then our feedback isn't all that useful. And if this test was meant to build more hype for the game, it clearly backfired. There's a reason studios usually keep early builds behind closed doors. Because when players hear the word beta, they don't think technical test. They think the game is nearly done, especially when it comes to MMOs, where people are starved for a good new release. And make no mistake, we MMO players are desperate. The only recent launches we had were Throne and Liberty, which had moderate success, but ultimately failed to deliver on its promise for a mass open-world PvP game, and Dune Awakening, which is a survival MMO. Until recently, a lot of MMO fans pinned their hopes on Ashes of Creation as the savior of the MMO genre. Then Chrono Odyssey showed up with a stronger trailer and an even stronger promise. No pay to win, action combat, challenging bosses. It became the new MMO messiah. But when hope meets reality, and that reality feels like an alpha pretending to be a beta, the backlash is inevitable. And yes, the devs admitted they used an old build because the new one wasn't stable, and honestly, I respect the transparency. But if the newer build wasn't ready, why launch the test now? Why not just delay? The CEO mentioned that more public tests are coming and used Baldur's Gate 3 as an example of a successful game that went a lengthy early access testing phase. That raises another question. Is a delay into next year potentially happening? I guess that depends on how far along the newer build is and whether the issues from its closed beta weekend have been fixed. If the second beta doesn't show real improvements, I'd say a delay is highly likely. And honestly, I wouldn't mind it if it means we get something closer to what they showed us in the trailers. And you'd think that would be it, right? All the drama. Nope, there's more. Some players managed to explore beyond the intended beta boundaries and found PvP-related assets and layouts that looked almost identical to those in New World. There's no denying that Chrono Odyssey is heavily inspired by New World. I mean, the combat, weapon swapping, crafting, gathering, the similarities are so strong some players are calling it the Korean New World. Not gonna lie, seeing assets that closely resemble New Worlds definitely raised some eyebrows. However, some players claim those assets are actually generic ones anyone can purchase online and use in their own projects. If that's true, I'm more inclined to believe the devs use them as a placeholder to test ideas before committing resources to something that might not even make it into the final game. PvP was never Chrono Odyssey's main focus, so it's possible those elements were added much later in development. All of that said, this video isn't meant to bash a game that still has real potential, if the devs listen to the feedback. The world design feels genuinely unique, and if you're a Marvel fan, yes, you will get to fight quite a few symbiote-looking bosses. Parry and counter mechanics felt satisfying when they actually worked, and I loved the random open-world boss fights. Watching players rush in to take down giant monsters made the world feel alive. It reminded me of the early days of Throne and Liberty before they moved those encounters into instance zones. Exploration was fun too. Finding a random camp with a quirky side quest that added to the lore and gave a useful item made the whole experience feel more rewarding. So where does that leave us? Well, the version we played had good bones, the devs just need to add the meat. Chrono Odyssey's beta wasn't a complete failure, it was a lesson. A bitter reminder of what happens when hype, fueled by content creators and a desperate MMO community, collides with the slow, messy reality of game development. I genuinely think there is still time to turn this around. But if Chrono Odyssey wants players to stick around, it starts with transparency. Show us what's actually being worked on. Give us builds that reflect current progress, not snapshots from a year ago. The CEO of Chrono Studios did respond that they will improve their communication with the public and are already working on a video message, development notes, and sharing their future plans for the game. The MMO genre is fragile right now. We've all been burned too many times. If Chrono wants to break that cycle, it will take more than just ambition. It will take trust. And that starts with calling it what it is, an early test, and saving the word beta for when the game is actually ready for it. Let me know what your experience was like in the comments. Did you have fun? Were you frustrated? If you enjoyed this video, consider giving it a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and reach more people. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.